On this episode of Full Bore, work continues on Crumpy the RN46 Toyota HiLux. So on this episode of Full Bore, we're working on Crumpy, the RN46 Toyota HiLux. Of course, in the last episode of Full Bore, we chopped a whole shebang out of the middle of the chassis to turn it into a short wheelbase. Now, on this episode, we're going to be working on it again, and predominantly on the drive shaft, because of course we've chopped the whole bit out of the middle. We're going to have to shorten the drive shaft to suit. Now, we're also going to be pulling that aluminium bull bar off. I might even look into a fuel system for it, because of course the fuel tank used to sit just behind the cab here in the big space that was previously there. So we'll get cracking on that, eh? So what we've got here, of course, the drive shaft out of Crumpy. Now, this is where it gets a little bit technical, because I want to sort of set the drive shaft's new length so that the slip joint is, of course, in its butter zone, not going to be bottoming out, not going to be slipping out like that, and you want a fair amount of engagement in the slip joint under normal suspension loads. As you can see, there's a nice shiny bit in this section here. What that says to me is that the drive shaft has spent most of its time, at very least, at that engagement there. So probably whilst the suspension's stagnant, sitting in the shed, not doing anything, the drive shaft is sitting at about that level there, because of course it's not rusty, it hasn't been out in the elements. There's also like a shiny bit here which sort of suggests to me when the vehicle's being used or has a load in the back, it was sort of maybe working in around about this area here. Probably when he had like it was a farmer who owned it before me, he might have had like water on the back of it or something like that. So what I want to do is sort of be a little bit conservative. I would rather the drive shaft bottom out before it pops out like that. So I'm going to be a bit conservative and maybe set the drive shaft's sort of working sort of position in around where it has been previously well worn. So the drive shaft running in its sort of optimum position, measured at 1.45 meters. Crumpy measured in its current position 1.08 meters. So yeah, that works out to be 0.37 meters or 370 mil that we want to chop out of this drive shaft. To kind of verify that, what I've got here is the actual piece of the chassis that we chopped out, and as you can see it's pretty well munted, so it's not like we wrecked a perfectly good car. I'm going to verify that by measuring the length of this. It's not going to end up being exactly 370 mil because of the way that a Pythagorean triangle or whatever works, but it will give us a pretty good indication. 420 mil, so it's only an extra that much. So I'm pretty happy with that, and it means that once again I am being fairly conservative about that drive shaft, so I'm pretty happy with chopping 370 mil out of it. I'm pretty darn happy with that. So chop the 370 mil out of it, V'd the edges so that way when they butt together there's a nice V for the weld to sit in, clean the surrounding metal. So all I've got to do now is tack it together, and I'll check for straightness, which is pretty important. You don't want a drive shaft sort of running out like that, and then I'll weld her up properly once and for all, maybe. We'll see. I'm definitely not a welder, however that should last. There's two welds there, one weld that looked actually really quite neat all the way around. I thought I'd have a second go at it, which was probably a bad idea, and I've ended up with some boogers. But that said, I'm not going to grind them down because I want to keep as much strength in there as physically possible. Now, I was also welding through the table, so I've got the table earthed out and I was sort of kind of rolling it, and I wasn't doing a very good job at it. They say not to earth it out through the uni joints because, of course, you've got your electricity trying to travel through caps and then through roller bearings, and that can stuff it all up. So if you're ever doing it, don't earth it out through there. Try and earth it out through the actual shaft itself or through the table. I was getting some pretty rubbishy earths there as well. So I'm sort of not working with the best of stuff and not the best of abilities, but hey, we're getting there in the end, and that's all that really counts. So what we're going to do is slap this on the car and see how we go. Probably a little bit too long potentially, but we'll soon find out. When you look at the geometry of everything, being a leaf sprung vehicle, they tend not to have too much drive shaft travel in relation to suspension travel, say compared to like a GU Patrol where they've got heaps of suspension travel and the drive shaft actually has to follow like a bit of an arc. This is a little bit different. It's only got about, say, 25 mil before it actually bottoms out in the drive shaft. So we'll soon figure out whether or not that's too short, and it's always just a case of just snipping it again and welding it back together. Next thing on the list to do, I'd really like to make a little tray for Crumpy. I know it's not really going to be sort of like a work ute per se, but I think it just doesn't quite look right without a tray. So I'm thinking, I've got a bit of this railroad track that I use to make the body rotisserie for the 40 series. So I might chop some of this up and maybe jut like a tray out from about there, might put some sides on it. Just to make it actually usable, and it'll give me a place where I can put the fuel tank, which would be kind of handy. So we'll get cracking on that, eh? Well, boys and girls, that pretty well concludes this episode of Full Bore. We've finalised sort of the basis for the tray. I'm quite happy with how it's coming along. That's pretty well all it's going to be. Of course, with some wood panelling in the floor just to finish it off. I will add some extra gusseting from the side back down to the chassis, and the reason being is that when I hit rocks and trees, I don't want it caving in like a rusty GQ Patrol roof. But yeah, I'm quite happy with it. May also put a roll cage, a roll bar on it, because when you look at the structural integrity of the roof, it looks quite bad. It's got a bit of the inherent rusty Toyota sills, particularly up in this side here, which looks quite nasty. Wouldn't like to roll this thing. Didn't get around to doing the bull bar. It's going to take some extensive work looking at how little chassis protrusion there is out the front, so I might have to weld some gussets out the front and somehow figure out a way to hold the bull bar up there whilst I do so. Anyway, that pretty well concludes this episode. In the future episode, you'll see this all finalised. We might even get some work done on the old 40 series over there. Anyway, we'll catch you on a future episode of this channel, which is, of course, Full Bore.